What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my main man, Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talker. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, well, we are back. We are off. We are running, and there is another wide receiver trade that has taken over the news cycle. And well, I got some insight on where the Pittsburgh Steelers stand, what the Pittsburgh Steelers are potentially looking at to give up for Davante Adams, or at least where they stand right now in some negotiations. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Steelers make a number of roster moves. We'll dive into all of them. And then another news segment today. We're breaking out some new segments all week long. Very excited about it. Today's power rankings. Pittsburgh Steelers power rankings to break down the top 5 Pittsburgh Steelers currently on the roster this season and where they stand and who's moving and when they're moving. Plus, we'll answer all your questions as we do every day. So make sure that you're tossing them in the chat. With that said, Nick, it's a beautiful one here in the Berg. I love the first beautiful day after a couple of rainy ones because everybody's feeling themselves. Everybody's walking down the street with a smile on their face. The music is louder. The smiles are bigger. It's a good one here in the Berg. How you feel, my friend?
I'm feeling good. Like you mentioned, we're debuting another segment for the second consecutive day. You actually have put me to work in the past week, which I've been waiting for a year. I was like, all right, listen, I can skate by under the radar for a little bit. And then finally you said, you know what? Let's earn your living a little bit here, Belsky. Let's do some segments that are going to be recurring, include a little bit of graphics for our video forum. So yes, I'm excited to debut another segment today.
Yeah, I mean, I am too. It's been a good week. I rewatched our our overreactions, last night, and it was a good time. It was a good time. I'm glad that we had some fun with it. We'll have some more fun today. Let's start with some news and notes. The Pittsburgh Steelers made a bunch of roster moves, and then we'll dive into Davante Adams. I'll toss it to you. What do we got?
Yeah, let's start in the running back room because running back Aaron Shamplin has officially been signed to the active roster, spelling probably some bad news for Jaylen Warren's statuses of this weekend, as well as Cordarrelle Patterson, but it looks like you're going to get to see a little bit more of your Harvard boy going up this Sunday against the Cowboys.
Yeah, Aaron Shamplin, man. The ability to sign him probably means two things. One, that the Pittsburgh Steelers are also going to call up Jonathan Ward this weekend. That means that they are going to use one of their practice squad elevations, and then the other one will most likely be a outside linebacker, potentially a corner in Thomas Graham and or CJ Henderson. So they could only bring up 2 each week. Shamplin playing or being signed to the roster likely means that both Jaylen Warren and Cordarrelle Patterson are out this week, maybe out for a couple of weeks. And the Steelers need to utilize only being able to call one running back up, and they'll do that with Jonathan Ward. But for those of you who have Jaylen Warren and Cordarrelle Patterson on your fantasy teams, for those of you who are sitting around hoping that those guys take over the reins and get more reps this week and Jaylen Warren returns, chances are that is unlikely, and it will be Najee Harris with Aaron Shamplin, the Harvard boy, and Jonathan Ward, journeyman at this point, behind him against Dallas.
Let's go over to the defensive side of things, because with Shamplin coming onto the roster and a couple other moves being made, that means some people had to go the other way, and that goes to the defensive secondary. Both Darius Rush and safety Jalen Elliott were released by the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday. Rush, obviously in his second year, has been a journeyman to this point already, and Jalen Elliott, somebody who surprised in camp, was released, came back, was on the roster from time to time, and now is released again.
Yeah, so Darius Rush, that stinks. I thought he had some potential. I was a bit surprised not when they cut him, but more so when they activated James Pierre and when they essentially just said Darius Rush is not a member of this roster, not a member of this game plan. You had to see it coming eventually. If he didn't really have a spot on the defense and he didn't have a spot on the special teams, there's really no spot left for him. Darius Rush was a surprise, but a guy that, hasn't worked out to this point. So the Pittsburgh Steelers just looked at it and said, we could just move on. Things will be fine. Maybe they bring him back to the practice squad. It wouldn't surprise me, but it also doesn't seem like a move that's likely right now. As for Jalen Elliott, wouldn't be shocked at all if he gets called back to the practice squad. He seems like a dude that the Pittsburgh Steelers rotate constantly. There was no need for him right now. They needed roster spots in other areas. With Terrell Edmonds, just made a lot of sense. He's a guy that, he's played 4 games. I hope that means that he accrued a full season. I don't remember what that exact number is. Dude who's impressed during his time in Pittsburgh this summer and this fall now. And I would imagine he comes back to the practice squad, but we'll see.
Now, it is week 5 of the NFL season, which means those who started the year on IR can start making their way back to the field. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing just that with outside linebacker Jeremiah Moon, who has his return window opened. He now has 21 days to either make the roster or go back on IR for the rest of the season.
Yeah, so he was a full participant in practice today. That's a really good sign. I would imagine the Steelers want him back in week 5. They need a guy behind Nick Herbig and TJ Watt. Nick Herbig isn't practicing right now. Mike Tomlin kind of let us know that was going to happen, but it's still certainly an injury to monitor. Alex Highsmith is not going to come back before Sunday night. The Steelers need somebody else. It would be less than ideal to start Jeremiah Moon in his first week back, but I do expect him to be activated to the 53-man roster by Sunday. And then I also expect the Steelers to potentially call somebody up like Jacoby Windman, who was just signed to the practice squad, to be that 3rd/4th guy, depending on where Nick Herbig stands. They're hoping Nick Herbig comes back, but that is not a guarantee where we currently stand.
And that's a wrap for the roster moves in-house. Now, of course, there's stuff going on outside of the Pittsburgh Steelers that has kind of trickled in to the 412. And for that, I can't do any more than toss it over to you.
So, as we've been following for 24 hours now, Davante Adams is the newest name of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm very excited to talk about Davante Adams and what we have heard. I'll lay the scene. I'll set the scene for you guys. I'm sitting to get an oil change today. The truck needed an oil change. Sitting there, I get a phone call. I answer the phone. Person on the other side of the phone goes, "Go get your laptop." I said, "Okay, that sounds great. That's when you tell me to do something, I'm going to do it." Chances are, I have been told a lot, to be honest with you, when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers and where Davante Adams and that trade situation currently stands. The Steelers have not hid the fact that they want a wide receiver, and in the words of both Chris Halleck and Jerry Dulac today, when water is wet, and that just means that with Davante Adams, of course, they're going to be interested. I've been told that the Pittsburgh Steelers are quote unquote absolutely in on the Davante Adams trade, and they have some serious interest in getting a deal done. Now, the Raiders obviously would rather trade Davante Adams to the NFC than the AFC, and they're not going to make it easy for any team to acquire Davante Adams. Now, it comes 2 parts here on what you could be looking at in a trade, and we'll dive into a kind of a mock trade that makes absolutely no sense here in a minute. But from what I have been told, the Raiders are looking for a 2nd-round pick and a, quote, significant player in exchange for Davante Adams. The Pittsburgh Steelers might feel comfortable with the 2nd-round pick. I don't believe they feel very comfortable with a significant player. That being said, when it comes to the contract side of things, they do feel they can get something done to make sure that this is not a 1-year rental, that Davante Adams could expand his contract, renegotiate some things, lower that cap number, and be here longer than just the 2024 season in Pittsburgh. But they want to make a move. They are certainly interested. I mean, this started with the Steelers, quote unquote, have what's the word?
Preliminary.
Thank you very much. Interest in Davante Adams, and they just want to have some conversation to see where they are. I was told that almost the moment that this became like a thing within the NFL, not a thing to us. A thing to us happens much later than a thing within general manager to general manager and around the NFL, that the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Las Vegas Raiders started talking, and they have continued those conversations over the last 24 hours. So I would imagine this is a fluid situation. This is something that will continue to build. The Pittsburgh Steelers are in on Davante Adams. They would like to get a deal done. They would like to acquire another wide receiver. It comes down to compensation and a contract, and can they fix both of those things? I don't think they'd give up a significant player simply because they don't really have a significant player to give up. But I do think that you could come up with a smaller package of less significant players and see if that works for the Raiders, or just try to juice up your pick. But I also, from what I have been told, there are teams that are interested, but nobody is sitting around super eager to give up what the Raiders are asking for just yet. especially with the contract situation. It would come down to getting the contract situation figured out first, and then you go to what do you have to give up. But I don't think, I mean, yesterday we were talking about teams are going to compete and it's going to raise the price tag. From the sense I have gotten, it doesn't feel like the NFL is very eager to hand a boatload of picks and players to the Raiders for a guy that, well, they see right now as, compared to the Brandon Ayuk situation a couple of months ago, a guy who would rather be out than be in, and that kind of gives them more leverage in the situation. The Steelers absolutely in on Davante Adams, second round pick, maybe a package there. Do you see players or do you see more picks when it comes to a Davante Adams move?
Yeah, when we talked about this yesterday, I said that I have a hard time believing it's going to be players just because we did this exercise with Ayuk. There's not really a lot of players that the Steelers are probably open to giving up that would count towards being a quote unquote significant player for the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, Highsmith's name was brought up in the summer. I think we all know that that should not be brought up ever again. But if you look at the defensive side, yeah, they have some depth at positions, but it's being tested at outside linebacker. They're being tested on the offensive line. They don't really have any depth at wide receiver, and they're certainly not going to do what some people think they should do when it comes to this trade. And now the running backs are hurt. So that's another area that they could have potentially had an area of strength to trade for to help an area of weakness. So I just don't see it unless the Raiders are willing to come down significantly on what they believe a significant player actually is.
Yeah, look at I agree there. And to be honest, what are the Raiders looking for? Because that has to match too. Are the Raiders looking for offensive linemen? Are the Raiders looking for a safety? Are the Raiders looking for? That's all they got. Like, if we're going to be honest, the Steelers don't have depth at a whole ton of places to say, hey, come on back. Here's this guy. Here's that guy. It just doesn't make a ton of sense in both sides, not just one side. I do think the Steelers are looking to get this done, though, and I do think the Steelers are going to be willing to say, hey, okay, look, we don't have a significant player, but we have a third-round pick we could toss in there. We have next year's third-round pick we could toss in there, something around those lines. I do anticipate them making a bit of a splash here to try and land a blockbuster move. If I had to, I mean, people love this one. What's the percentage on where we stand currently?
Yeah.
If I had to toss it out there, I rocked 70 for a long time. And I would probably put this one a little bit higher, 75%. We're there. We're not closing in. This is not on the goal line. I don't even think we're in the red zone yet. But I would imagine the Pittsburgh Steelers are the leading candidate to land Davante Adams and are probably more urgent to get a deal done than anyone else. Now, before we move on, before we go in a different direction here, the 33rd team tossed this trade out here, and I think it's very important. Very important. Oh, also, let's go Cordell Patterson first. Can we bring up Cordell Patterson's? First off, this guy's doing the Lord's work here for the Pittsburgh Steelers, continuing to recruit Davante Adams, which has to help. I haven't gotten a chance to ask if he is boys with Davante Adams, if he knows Davante Adams personally. I have no idea, but Cordell Patterson wants him here, and I'm sorry, but you could look at Sauce Gardner, you could look if Cordell Patterson's recruiting you to Pittsburgh, I'm pretty pumped about it, and I feel like that holds some ground. So shout out to Cordell Patterson. The second part of this, the 33rd team dropped one absolutely wild trade, and I just want your opinion on it. Have you seen it yet?
Yes, I have seen it, so I know where we're going with this. And
okay.
Yeah.
I'll ask you for your original reaction here. The trade was Davante Adams for a third-round pick and this guy named George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, it was almost as if they haven't paid attention to anything. It was almost as if whoever came up with this trade just was like, well, that makes a lot of sense, without realizing what the Pittsburgh Steelers have been trying to do for literal months now. But I'll ask you, did you see it? And what were your thoughts when you did?
Yeah, I definitely saw it. And it seems more like a fantasy football trade that you're trying to make with the guy that auto sets his lineups than an actual NFL trade. It makes obviously zero sense. Why would the Steelers do that swap and say, you know what, we'll take the older gentleman so we can trade away a future number one and then, also have to deal with his contract. Again, the fact that it's thrown out there, is it just shows me to take that site a little bit less seriously than I did in previous days.
Yes, that one was the first time I saw it, I said, because I saw FanDuel say second round pick, and I said, oh, that makes sense. So I just like quickly typed into Twitter, Steelers Davante Adams trade, just to see, because I knew there were going to be like mock trades, and I just wanted to see them. I saw that one, and verbally, it was 5:45 in the morning this morning, and I verbally laughed out loud. Like, and you should not be able to express emotions at 5:45 in the morning. I was ready to go. That one got me all juiced up. So, I mean, there's literal zero chance. And to just add to the Pickens side of this, in those conversations that I have had throughout the day, the Pittsburgh Steelers are not worried about Davante Adams and any attitude issues or concerns that some people on the outside might have, and instead view him as a better candidate, their best option, actually, to come in here and help mentor George Pickens and kind of get him in a direction in which they want him to be moving forward. So it's a lot going on with Davante Adams. Very excited about where this is going. Definitely a fluid situation for both sides, and one to keep an eye on for sure. I know there's a bunch of questions out there. We're going to answer them in a little bit. I do want to get to power rankings, and I do want to get to everybody's questions. First, let's take a break real quick and hear from our boys over at DraftKings. There's a crisp in the air. The leaves, they are falling. And my friends, football is on every single weekend. That is what fall is all about. And you can make your weekends even more exciting with our partners, DraftKings. Right now, any new customer who signs up and bets $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets by using our promo code All Steelers. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code All Steelers. The crown is yours. That's $200 in bonus bets instantly. Then stay in on the action and use that $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns with DraftKings. DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings daily fantasy football and have a shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code ALLSteelers and bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code ALLSteelers only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Shout out our boys over at DraftKings. All right, let's break out a new segment number 2 this week, and we're not done. We got another one coming tomorrow. Very excited. Hopefully you guys liked Overreaction Tuesday yesterday. I had a blast doing it, so I hope you guys had a blast participating and watching it as well. You guys could check all of that out on YouTube if you missed it, and could actually check out the audio as well anywhere you get your podcasts. Today, we got our Pittsburgh Steelers power rankings, and I forgot to flip the page on my notebook, so I will do that now. But the Pittsburgh Steelers power rankings, we got 5 of them. And what we will do here is we will break down the top 5 Pittsburgh Steelers, not just of the week and not just moving forward, but where they currently stand. I'm talking overall body of work throughout the season. And to be honest, some of them came in here already on this list, and they have moved down or fluctuated. And some of them, well, they're shockers, and they're big shockers, and I'm excited to share them with you. But I got my top 5 plus 2 honorable mentions. I'll start with my honorable mentions. Actually, the first one is Minkah Fitzpatrick, a guy who, he's been quiet, but he's also been productive. He has made more plays than you think. Oh, we haven't had one of those in a while. He's made more plays than you think he has made this season, and will continue to make plays throughout the season. He's leading this defense, and I promise you, he's a guy that, I get it, he's been quiet, but he is not super quiet. The other one is Dante Jackson, dude who has come onto the scene, and I've been saying this, you have been saying this since early in the summer. Dante Jackson's going to be a stud. Very excited for what he brings. He's showing it all. I mean, the dude comes up with interceptions. He's a great tackler. He is not afraid to be physical, and he could keep up with any of them. So I am all about Dante Jackson. Now we'll dive into the nitty gritty here. The top 5 Pittsburgh Steelers currently. We're heading into week 5. We'll go week 4 power rankings. Is this week 5 power rankings? How does that usually work? Is it the week before, week after?
Let's say it's week 5 power rankings, because that's the week we're in right now.
Okay, let's go week 5 power rankings. Pittsburgh Steelers. We got 2 honorable mentions of Minkah Fitzpatrick and Dante Jackson. I got 5 good ones for you. We'll start with the wide receiver that the 33rd team would like to trade away in exchange for Davante Adams, and that is Mr. George Pickens, a guy who's very quietly had 113 yards against the Indianapolis Colts this week. Everybody would look at that game and say George Pickens did not play his greatest football, gave away a fumble, dropped a touchdown that, I get it, Justin Fields came back and secured for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but still dropped a touchdown, fumbled the ball early in the first half. Well, he still finished with 113 yards. He's got 284 yards on the season, and that does not include all of the penalties that have been negated, whether it's pass interference, holding, a screen by Van Jefferson. Doesn't matter. Dude's putting on a show. He is proving that he is your number one wide receiver. He comes up with plays when you need him to come up with plays. He's still the most reliable set of hands the Pittsburgh Steelers have had in a long time, and a dude who is easily on the up and up. But George Pickens is an easy one here at number 5. There was no way I wasn't going to squeeze him into my top 5. In fact, I had a hard time not putting him higher. And I tried very hard to say, okay, this has got to be somewhat of an even split offense and defense. And I had a very hard time with that one, but there were 2 names that I had to make sure got in here from the offensive side of the ball. The first one was George Pickens. The second one, well, it's the quarterback that is now, or at least should be, and I think in the eyes of Mike Tomlin is already, quarterback 1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is Justin Fields, is number 4 right now. And you could come up with names. You could come up with a lot of names, and you could come up with some sneaky names, if we're going to be honest. Dan Moore should be somewhere in the honorable mentions. Zach Frazier should be somewhere in the honorable mentions. Keanu Benton should be somewhere in the honorable mentions. And I'm sorry, Justin Fields is getting better by the week. I don't think he was in the top 5 last week. If we started this in week 4, I think Justin Fields is an honorable mention, making his way into the top 5. I think what he did in Indianapolis jumped him up 2 spots. And where we currently stand, this is a guy that just came off of a historic game despite the loss. First quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers to throw for over 300 yards, rush for over 50 yards, and score 3 touchdowns in a game. He put the entire team on his back. And I get it. That last drive was rough, and you got to be better than it. But I said it today to somebody, and I will say it again on this show. If you can trust the Pittsburgh Steelers to teach their quarterbacks anything, it's winning when you need to win a football game late in a football game. What you can't trust them to do is teach them how to do the rest. Kenny Pickett could win you a game. If you gave him a minute and 20 seconds in the football, he was going to win that game for you. 10 times out of 10 times, I would put my money on Kenny Pickett. The first, what would that be, 48 minutes? 59 minutes, 58 minutes and 40 seconds. He is not good at all. Justin Fields, he's pretty darn good for the first 58 and a half minutes. He's just got to work on that last drive, and I think he's near perfect. I also think if George Pickens doesn't fumble, the Pittsburgh Steelers win. I also think that if Najee Harris steps out of bounds, or if Mike Tomlin calls a timeout on 4th down, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a much better shot of winning that football game. Justin Fields has gotten better with age, and by age, I mean 4 games, and there is much more season ahead, and I am very excited about what we have in front of us with the Pittsburgh Steelers and this quarterback. Number 3, and then I'll ask you your opinion on my top 3 before I dive into my last 2 here. Cam Hayward. You want to talk about the most underrated player on the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, it is Cam Hayward. Guy's got 17 tackles, 2 sacks, and 3 tackles for loss through 4 games at 35 years old, coming off a major injury. Worth the contract? Yeah, I would say yes. He is. Cam Hayward, like I just said, has been the most underrated player in Pittsburgh all season long. That has not changed. He has made massive plays when you need him to make massive plays. He has taken on much more. And if you go back and watch the film, the run defense struggled against Indianapolis, and he did everything he possibly could to hold it together. So Cam Hayward is a dude that I think deserves much more credit, is a guy that I look at right now as the 3rd best player on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, also aging like fine wine, but he really is. And it's crazy to see where he is currently. My 5, 4, and 3, George Pickens, Justin Fields, Cam Hayward. We'll dive into my top 2 here in a second, but I want your opinion on those 3 first.
I like him, especially Cam Hayward, because the big question coming into the year is how is he going to look after a year that was essentially lost due to groin injuries? I mean, he played in a handful of games. He played a good bit. He was in the playoffs, but at the same time, he wasn't himself. So to call last year the downfall of Cam Hayward was greatly, greatly exaggerated. And he showed from week 1 to week 4 to this point that he is exactly who he has always been, which is a run-stuffing beast in the middle of the defensive line. He's been really good for the Steelers. And like you mentioned, that's a position that doesn't always get its flowers. So I like what he's been able to do. And that's why, I mean, they shut down J.K. Dobbins in week 3. That's why they held Bijan Robinson in check for a lot of week 1. So he's done a really good job. So I like his presence there. And then the connection of Fields and Pickens has been ridiculous the entire season. Like you mentioned, the numbers are not showing the full story. So I like the fact that you have them kind of side by side, because that's how their fate's going to be intertwined throughout the remainder of this season.
Yeah, especially when you bring Davante Adams into the mix and you just watch everybody get better, George Pickens included. All right, my top 2 here. I think everybody knows number 1. You know, you don't have to hide number 1. We'll still get to it, but you don't have to hide number 1. Number 2, I think, is a bit of a surprise. There were names on here. Joey Porter Jr., I think, was right off this list. He could be another honorable mention. If we're going to be honest, I think in my original list, he was there before Minka, but I put Cam Hayward instead and came up with Minka in my head real fast. I think Joey Porter should have filled that role. But number 2, to me, Deshaun Elliott. Safety that they signed that has saved the Pittsburgh Steelers secondary, that has done so much for this team. And I mean, we said it all summer long. Deshaun Elliott was a stud. This dude was going to be excellent. He was the missing piece to the Pittsburgh Steelers defense that they have been missing for a while. And let me tell you, they found him. He's 27 years old. We could have talked about Justin Fields or Justin Simmons. We could have talked about Jamal Adams. You could have named a billion names to come to Pittsburgh. Nobody was talking about Deshaun Elliott, and somehow they went and they got the best one they possibly could. He's got 30 tackles, 2 pass deflections, 1 forced fumble, and an interception this season. This dude is red hot. He plays all over the field. He makes noise every single play. I'm sorry, but I don't think that there's anybody in the secondary right now as good as Deshaun Elliott is. That dude is an absolute stud. And then number 1 on this list, 0 questions asked, TJ Watt, a guy who started this season red hot by taking over, and you could ask Justin Fields this, taking over a game in Atlanta against the Falcons. He had 1 sack, should have had 3, probably more, including a bow at the end there. He's got 3 sacks on the season, 5 tackles for loss, and did literally nothing against the Indianapolis Colts. So he's got 3 sacks and 5 tackles for loss in 3 games. That's pretty good. Should have had 2 more, minimum 2 more this season, and that would have put him at 5. So TJ Watt is an absolute stud. He remains the Pittsburgh Steelers, the heart and soul of the Pittsburgh Steelers. You could look at Indy and say, oh, blah, blah, blah. Go back and watch him get hugged. 60 minutes of hugging. And it's a good compilation. You know, if you really just want to watch TJ Watt get held, you could just go rewatch that game. It's enough to fill your entire afternoon. He is hands down the best player on the Pittsburgh Steelers, remains the best player on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those are my top 2, Deshaun Elliott, TJ Watt. Before we head into questions, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I like the whole list. I mean, I like the fact that we're doing this. I think it's going to be a fun way to track the season. Yes. I like the graphic as well, but the choice of Deshaun Elliott at 2, I put him in my top 5. I would put him in my top 5, but number 2, I like it a lot. We've talked about it every single week. Like, oh, here comes Deshaun Elliott. We text every week. Oh, look at that play by Deshaun Elliott. So I love the fact that he's debuting in these power rankings, the debut of another segment here at number 2. So I'm excited to see maybe he overtakes TJ Watt. I think that would be a surprise. That would certainly be an upset, but you know, he's played very good and he's leading the Steelers defense and tackles. So he's had a great season thus far.
Yeah. I mean, when Minka Fitzpatrick came, there was probably a point in time where he was higher on that list than TJ Watt. So I'm not going to say never when it comes to Deshaun Elliott continuing to climb, but for right now, TJ Watt remains the most dominant player in Pittsburgh. That's our 5. George Pickens, Justin Fields, Cam Hayward, Deshaun Elliott, and TJ Watt. We're going to do this every week. Very excited about it. With that said, It's time. Let's dive into all the questions. If there are Davante Adams questions, I think we start there because that is the biggest topic of conversation that we possibly have. But I know we got a bunch. What do we got?
Yeah, let's start with Brian, who says, playing the devil's advocate here. Say we miss out on Davante Adams. Who is your next go-to to fill out this wide receiver room? Is it Mike Thomas? Is it D-Hop? Or do we look elsewhere like the Texans, who have about 80,000?
The Texans do have a ton. I would say it's DeAndre Hopkins. Where we currently stand, I would say it's DeAndre Hopkins. It's a guy who's really hasn't played much at all in Tennessee this season. A dude who Brian Callahan, I was watching his press conference yesterday, and he was just essentially just like, yeah, man, like, you know, we're warming him up. You don't need to warm up DeAndre Hopkins. What are we talking about? You know, that's the last guy on the roster you need to warm up. I would say DeAndre Hopkins is top of that list. And a guy that in the next couple of weeks, I expect to be in the same situation that Davante Adams is in currently, looking for a new home.
Let's jump down to Steven. Appreciate you as always. Says Aaron Rodgers will make sure that the New York Jets get Davante Adams.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree. It's hard to disagree, but I would say that the Steelers are going to try as hard as they possibly can. And also, the Jets are, you know, maybe not all. Maybe Davante wants to go there, but the Jets might not want him to come there. And I don't know if that's true, but it just, from what I have heard, the Pittsburgh Steelers feel like they are the front runners in this. And, well, that means a lot. So I agree with you. Aaron Rodgers is going to do what he could do. And if it was up to Davante, I bet you he'd go anywhere. But Antonio Pierce and the Raiders organization right now don't feel like a team that cares what Davante Adams wants. They just want to get rid of him. And the Steelers might come calling first.
Marlon Lewis says, if Davante is available, does that mean Jacoby Myers might be too?
No, totally different situation. I mean, Antonio Pierce, it started with him liking the tweet or whatever, and then, or liking the Instagram post, and then Davante replying to it on the Up and Adams show. And then from there, the reports that the Raiders are calling people, and then boom, Davante requests a trade. So it was a complete snowball effect of nonsense. And now, I don't know if everybody watched Antonio Pierce's press conference, but he was asked about it, and his response was, I'm focused on Denver. And it just felt like a guy who was done, and that's where we stand with Davante, but Jacoby isn't going anywhere.
There's a lot of people that ask this question, so let's go to this mock trade from Sean Carter, who says Russell Wilson, a 2025 third-round pick for Davante Adams. What are your thoughts? And like I mentioned, plenty of others asked, what about Russell Wilson being in this return?
What about Russell Wilson being a return? There's components to this, okay? There are levels to this situation. For starters, you got to convince Russ that he gets to go to Vegas and that he's good. But Russ is quote unquote healthier. He's getting there. He's almost back and ready to go. So you never know. You got to convince him to go there, okay? Which that means Vegas has to make a commitment that he's the starter because he's got a no trade clause. You got to feel comfortable with Kyle Allen. And you have to really trust that Justin Fields could lead you to a Super Bowl this season and that he's going to stay healthy in the process. If you could do all those, why not? Why not make Russell Wilson the quote-unquote significant player? I think, for one, it does lower the second to a third, especially a team like Vegas who desperately needs a quarterback. And, I mean, why not? Why not? That's why I say, why not? It makes a lot of sense not to. The Steelers' mindset has always been, we want two solid quarterbacks. This is the first time where you got to look at it and say, maybe you think about it in a different light, because this is the wide receiver target that you have been looking for outside of Brandon Ayuk.
Now, there's one for Russell Wilson. There's also speculation now about Najee Harris. What if the trade is Najee Harris and a fifth for Davante Adams? If Warren becomes healthy and looks good, I don't see why you keep Najee.
Look, at the only other position that you could think that the Las Vegas Raiders desperately need is a guy at running back. And Najee Harris, well, is a running back. Here's the thing. Jaylen Warren is not healthy. Cordell Patterson is not healthy, which hurts, because you are not going to trade Najee Harris and start Aaron Shapklin. You're just not going to do that. And that one's tough. As for a fifth, I don't believe that it lowers the bar that much. I would say Najee keeps it right around that second. I think you could lower the bar for Russ because he's a quarterback. You probably don't lower the bar for anybody else, including Najee. I think Najee is still a second-round pick for the Raiders. With a second-round pick for the Raiders, and then you get Davante Adams. If Jalen or Cordero were healthy, that's a conversation to be had. That's definitely a conversation to be had. And I'm sure that Vegas might ask the question, hey, maybe, but I just wouldn't. You're going to start Aaron Shapklin? That's tough. That's tough to say. I like this. I like this a lot. Najee in a second for Davante, but I just don't think the health status works in the Steelers' favor right now.
Let's go over to Wesley Smith, who says, any chance the Steelers would be able to keep Adams more than just the 1-year rental? Trading a high draft pick would make more sense if we knew we could keep him around for 2 to 3 more years.
Yeah, the Steelers do feel somewhat confident that they could rework a deal, but that's a 50-50 split. That's just coming from the Steelers side. They probably haven't had any contact with Davante or his people, and they probably won't until a trade happens. So it's tough to call. It's a two-sided situation. It's a two-sided coin here. You have to give and take, and that means the Steelers have to offer something. And at the same time, Davante's got to be comfortable taking a smaller cap hit. I would imagine he does, especially if he feels comfortable in Pittsburgh. But again, I don't know. But there are ways to rework it and to get him here longer than this season while lowering his cap hit. And the Steelers are definitely going to try to do that if they approach and reach a deal with the Raiders.
Jim D is sending us into a tailspin that we were in for months this summer. Says, hey, Noah, why doesn't Pittsburgh do the original deal and trade picks for Ayuk to San Francisco that San Francisco can then use to get Adams, who is a good receiver? The exact deal that was in place a couple months back.
Yeah. So, yeah. Why not? Why not? I will say this. I think I'd take Davante Adams over Brandon Ayuk right now. I mean, if we're just looking at numbers, productivity, guys sinking my fantasy team, I would take Davante Adams over Brandon Ayuk. Long term, Ayuk makes more sense. I don't know if the Steelers are looking for that. I mean, you could get probably Davante Adams for less than $30 million for the next 2 years, and that's pretty good. And then maybe you don't guarantee him anything after next season, and that's even better. I think it works out better this way. I think he's less of an attitude issue than Brandon Ayuk is, and I think Davante right now is playing better football. So I agree with you. I think that could be a possibility, could work. I don't know if it's going to. And I also don't think that San Francisco, while they would want to get rid of that cap hit if Ayuk is playing poorly with Christian McCaffrey hurt, I don't think they're gonna look at it that way, and I don't think they're gonna make a trade.
Let's go over to Lifted Ones, who says, based on the show receiver, is Adams the best fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers? He seems like a diva, but I guess that's most receivers.
Yeah, that's like 99% of receivers, if we're going to be honest. Again, what I was told from a source today was that the Steelers are not worried about Davante Adams. In fact, they view him the complete opposite way, as a guy who could come in here and mentor guys like George Pickens, Roman Wilson, and Calvin Austin. And they're not super concerned. I've also spoken to people in Vegas, and they have said that there's a reputation about Davante Adams, but that reputation is wrong, and that Davante Adams has a really good character around him and a very high standard with a lot of people. So I would, I mean, take that as you will. Don't just, don't say Noah said it and that's gospel. But that's what I've been told from both parties here.
Let's go down to this question that says, will Davante Adams sit out for the Raiders until he does get traded?
I would imagine the Raiders bench him. Yeah, it's probably both. It's the Raiders not looking to play him and Adams not looking to play. So I would imagine yes.
Let's go down to Lucrative, who says, are you worried Davante Adams wouldn't work with a quarterback like Justin Fields, who struggles with timing and accuracy, something Rodgers was phenomenal at?
Yeah, two things that Justin Fields has done pretty well with since taking over as the starter this season that he did not do well with in the preseason, and he did not do well with during training camp, but he has certainly done well during the regular season, is timing and accuracy. He's been pretty spot on with both of them. Now, don't get me wrong, made a bad decision on the final drive against the Colts, nearly threw an interception. You kind of go back and also look at that and say, where was the spacing there? with those routes made no sense, but I digress. I'm not going to say that Justin Fields is a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. He's nowhere close to a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers, but I still think that he's a good quarterback right now, on the verge of being a very good quarterback, and I think Davante Adams would be excited about that.
That's the last of the Adams questions. Do you want any final thoughts, or do we want to just jump right into the remainder of the questions here?
No, keep going with the questions here.
All right, let's go to Demetrius Barr, who says, did you see Chris Carter's take on the Steelers defense not defending the middle of the field well versus the Colts? And do you think it's something to be concerned about? Hoping to see you Sunday versus the Cowboys.
Yeah. I do think it's something to be slightly concerned with. They did not defend the middle of the field very well against Indianapolis whatsoever. I don't think they were expecting to have to, and I believe that hurt them, and they were unable to make adjustments, which you could put on Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin. It was almost like once Joe Flacco went in there and they realized this isn't going to be the same game plan, they panicked and they had nothing in the tank for them. That's kind of what it felt like. It does make me nervous, but I also don't look at Dallas as another trap game, and that makes me feel better about the Steelers picking it back up, being better off where they stand and coming back and having a bounce back game. He's right. Chris Carter is right. We've talked about this, actually, me and Chris have. And the Steelers struggled mightily over the middle of the field. But again, it kind of all started. It started with the play with Michael Pittman to Anthony Richardson. But once Joe Flacco went in there and you realized that's where he was going to target, the Steelers just had. It was almost as if they went into that game going, they will not throw in the middle of the field no matter what we do. So we don't have to worry about it. And they were wrong.
I lied. I missed this one. This is another Davante Adams question from Nate Moore, who says, does the O-line injuries increase the chances that the Steelers pursue Adams in an attempt to become a more pass-focused team?
I hope so. I think this offense is slowly going to start revolving itself around Justin Fields. I really do. I think where we stand here, it's going to be much more Justin Fields oriented, both in the run and the pass game. Davante helps that. I think the Steelers just want another star wide receiver. Like, they realize that they need somebody. This is a great option. They want to go get it. Even with the healthy offensive line, I still think if Davante was available, they would say, yeah, we got to go try, and they would go get an attempt. But I hear what you're saying, and I do think it's going to become more Justin Fields oriented, whether that's pass, run, or a mixture of both.
There's a lot of people that are asking about Pittsburgh's favorite wide receiver that has yet to step foot on a football field, and that is, how far is Roman Wilson from making an impact on the Steelers?
Far, I would guess. I don't know, to be honest. It's weird. It's very like where we stand right now, the Steelers aren't going to bench Van Jefferson. They probably should. Like, if we're going to be honest, the Steelers should sit here and give a helmet to Roman Wilson and take one away from Van Jefferson and just say, let's see if this works better. And if it doesn't, go back and say, Roman, you're now on the bench again. Who cares? But the way I look at it is Roman will not play anytime soon, simply because the Steelers just don't have a helmet for him, and they refuse to take one away from Van Jefferson to give it to him, and that's why he won't be on the field.
Let's go over to Marlon Lewis, who says, will Henderson get some reps this week?
I don't know. I would imagine him or Thomas Graham gets called up for the game. Maybe this is Henderson after a second week of working in the defense. Could be too early still, and it'll be Thomas Graham. They like Thomas Graham, so can't take anything away from Thomas Graham. But it'll be one of those two. But I think Henderson is definitely a viable option who could be involved for sure.
Grayson wants to know, how do you guys see the Steelers offensive line holding up against the depleted Cowboys defensive line?
I think it'll be a good matchup. Isaac Seumalo is key here. Isaac Seumalo is a guy that comes back and, I mean, should make things better. Mason McCormick not having to be such a pivotal role to this offensive line helps as well. I think getting Isaac back is going to be so massive for the Steelers offense and will be something that boosts them. I mean, Micah Parsons might play where we currently stand. The Cowboys are going to test him and see what happens. I don't know how you play on a high ankle sprain. I remember the days of the NFL where a high ankle sprain was almost season ending. Now where we stand, you can come back in 4 days, which is nuts. But I do think the offensive line, there's less to worry about than we're worrying about right now, all because Isaac is coming back.
Let's go over to Vibin with the Dogs, who says, who's going to start at right guard, Mason McCormick or Spencer Anderson?
It's going to be Mason McCormick. It's going to be Mason McCormick. There's really no thought here. Spencer's going to be the backup. Mason is a dude they have a lot of faith in, and they're going to test the waters with as long as they can. He's going to start at right guard, and also Mason has more experience on right guard, so he's going to start right guard, and Isaac's going to start at left.
Let's go over to OS, who says, enjoy the overreactions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you for Sunday's game?
Confident. I'm still confident. I don't think 3-1 is a bad place to be. I think you had a bad game against the Colts with a lot of opportunity to grow, but I think that the offensive line is very depleted. The defense, that's what gives me hope, is the defense stunk, and that's not something I expect to happen week in and week out. So I think that's a bounce back game for them. I look at this as a big opportunity to shut a lot of critics up, and one they most likely take advantage of. So I would say confidence level 1 to 10, a 7 right now. I would say a sound 7.
Let's go over to Brock Walker, who says, will Cole Holcomb replace Peyton Wilson when he returns as a rotational piece, or will they rotate all of them?
I think they'll rotate all of them. I don't know if Cole Holcomb's going to come back this season. We'll wait and see, but I would imagine they do rotate all of them. Originally, slowly work, like Cole Holcomb's workload at first is going to be very, very, very low, just because he's coming off of a ridiculously serious injury and something that hasn't played football in a year by the time he comes back. So it'll be slow, and I imagine they rotate all 4 of them in, with Cole just slowly working his way back into the defense throughout the season.
Let's go over to Cody, who says, Noah, how come no one is talking about how Beanie Bishop got smoked against the Colts? How do you think he's going to hold up the rest of the year, or at least until Cam Sutton comes back?
I mean, that's the thing, is you only got to last until Cam Sutton comes back. So there are going to be some hiccups. There are going to be some mistakes, but you only got to last another 4 weeks. That's all you got to last, is another 4 weeks. And I think he could hold up these next 4 weeks. He had some bad moments. He also had some decent moments against the Colts. So mostly rushing and working behind the line of scrimmage, which is as crazy as it sounds, the easier element of playing slot corner, but I thought he played well in those aspects of his game. I have confidence he's going to hold up long enough, and then Cam's going to be fine once Cam was back in the building today, and he'll be back for the next 4 weeks to ramp up. So he'll be ready come week 10, and I expect that he'll be fine as long as Cam comes back and takes over that role.
Let's go over to Brian, who says, Noah, why wasn't Freiermuth on your power rankings? He came through in tight situations and even scored a touchdown while falling down 5 yards off the goal line.
Yeah. Pat's having a very under the radar year. I don't know. I might bust him tomorrow and tell him that he didn't make my power rankings and see how he reacts. I don't know. He was a guy that to me is still on the outside looking in. If I had to rank him, Joey Porter was the closest one to make that top 5. If it wasn't for a really bad game in Indianapolis, I think he is in that top 5, but Justin Fields kind of jumped up above him. Pat's looked good. Pat's been under the radar. He hasn't had the receiving year that George Pickens has had yet. And because of that, I think he's an honorable mention. But you make a good point. And I do think he is very close to that top 5 for sure.
Let's go over to Cody Silva, who says, do you think if we start throwing the ball more on first down, it'll help get off to a faster start? It's always run first, second down, and then wonder why we go for 3 and out so fast.
Yeah. I do think you got to throw the football on first down. I think you got to throw the football on second down, if we're going to be honest. Like, I'm cool with running the football on first down as long as you're throwing the football on second down. That's where I stand. Or doing something out of somewhere. It's too predictable with these second down runs. That's where the bigger issue to me is. But I agree with you. I think you got to change it up. I expect them to change it up a little bit. I think the game plan in Indianapolis was so bad that I have a hard time believing Mike Tomlin and company did not walk into a meeting on Monday and say, Art, what the hell was that, man? You got to fix it, because that's how brutally awful it was. So I expect them to change. I expect it to be a little bit less predictable And, we'll see what happens, but I agree with you. I'm more of the second down run. Gotta get rid of the second down run. And I hope that they do, to be honest.
Let's go to Leandrew25, who says, how many sacks does TJ Watt get against the Cowboys this Sunday?
We get asked this every single week, and I'm wrong every single week. I'm going to go 2 sacks. I'm going to go 2 sacks on this one. I think TJ needs a big day.
Yeah,
that's what
it feels like a good day to have your first multi-sack performance. Well, at least one that counts in the records.
I was going to say second with an asterisk. Yeah, I think this is a good one for TJ to have 2 sacks, and I'm going to guess 2 sacks on this one. I'm going to feel comfortable with it.
Let's go over to Steven, who says, can you end a show every week with a different Tomlinism?
We probably could.
I can't give you all the ingredients to the hot dog. You might not like it.
We could end every show with just that Tomlinism.
I actually started thinking of like intros to Overreactions Tuesdays, and I just tried to figure how many times I could fit that into something before it gets old.
Well, I guess we'll have to learn. I mean, we got 14 weeks left. We got plenty of time.
We got time.
Let's go to Diana, who says, hey, Noah, when tight ends are chipping TJ, is he allowed to just crush and lay out the tight end while he's trying to chip him before he gets to his route?
Yeah, you could hit him back. That's the problem though with chips, is that TJ's rushing the tackle, and it's kind of, when tight ends chip you, they typically line up to a place where it looks like they're going to run out, and then they give you a little hit. So it's tougher to see it coming. But yeah, he could smoke them if they want to. He's just not rushing that way. Like his body momentum. Let me do this in front of the camera. His body momentum, let's say, this is a bad angle. Let's like this. Okay. So if the tackle's in front of the eraser here, that's where he's rushing, and the tight end's lined up over here. So he'd have to almost switch his body angle. That's why he doesn't do it. But he could, if he wanted to just square up and just smoke him, he definitely could.
Let's go over to Chris, who says, what are your thoughts on just not trading for Davante Adams and just keeping the picks instead?
I don't know. I'm not upset about it. I think that's a decent move if they just say, whatever, we're good with what we have. But I do think that it's a very significant, very, very significant upgrade to get Davante Adams. I don't think it's overlooked. I don't think it's we're hyping up this move for nothing. No, I think it is a complete game changer of a move to go get Davante Adams. I look at Davante Adams as, if your wide receiver core is that good, you are already a contender in my eyes. You're a contender. You are crazy serious at potentially winning a Super Bowl this year if Justin Fields continues to play as good as he's played, and you have 2 star wide receivers in George Pickens and Davante Adams, with hopefully some sort of running game coming at some point.
Let's go to Steel City 74. Maybe a Spencer Anderson in disguise says, when do we start to worry about Patrick Queen? People are labeling him a bust.
I mean, the Steelers paid him so that he could be a bust and they could just move on after the season. There's nothing guaranteed in his contract after 2024. I mean, they're not wrong. You go back and watch the tape. It is not good. The Patrick Queen tape is very disappointing right now. I think he could turn it around. I don't know what's going on. What I've been told, I've talked to people in Baltimore who've said, yeah, this is what you got in Baltimore. It was just hidden because of Roquan Smith. Okay. Maybe it could be hidden because of Peyton Wilson or Landon Roberts or Minka or TJ Watt or who knows. I don't know. It's disappointing for sure. I don't think it's a he's not playing excellent, but he's also not sucking. And I think that's important to point out here, is he is not the reason the defense is failing or struggling at times. He's just not a constant contributor to make it better. So it could be more concerning. The Steelers have had it much more concerning in the past.
Let's go to Chris, because I think he's asked this at least 24 times. What about DeAndre Hopkins?
I think DeAndre Hopkins is the next name on this list. I've mentioned that earlier in the show. I think that's the next name on the list. If Davante Adams doesn't work out, I expect him to be in a Davante Adams situation soon. Less dramatic, potentially. I don't know. It's hard to guess with wide receivers, but I do think he's gone from Tennessee by week 8, and I think the Steelers could approach him next if Davante Adams doesn't work out.
Speaking of the Davante Adams trade, Known Limit says if the Jets do get Davante Adams, is there a scenario that there can be a way that we
Yeah.
swoop in to get Garrett Wilson? He doesn't sound happy the way he's being used.
I don't know. I don't want to say no because I don't know anything about New York. I haven't talked to anybody in New York, so I can't sit here and say that can't happen. I also haven't watched a Jets game at all this season, so I can't say that he's like visibly upset, and there's nothing trending on Twitter all the time telling me that he's upset. So I can't say no. I'd have a really hard time saying the Jets are willing to trade Garrett Wilson right now. I have a really hard time saying that would work out. As for a trade to Pittsburgh, great, but you better be willing to give up 2 first-round picks, and I don't think Pittsburgh is going to be willing to. So that's where I think the crossroads on Pittsburgh's side of this that I can make a logical explanation out of would kind of hit a road bump.
Let's go over to Caleb, who wants to know any update on Cordero Patterson.
No, didn't practice today. Don't know where we stand. Would imagine he is not playing this week. With Aaron Shapklin getting called up, probably indicates that you're going to need 2 running backs to be elevated from the practice squad. So you signed one of them. Aaron Shapklin, Jonathan Ward will work behind Najee Harris, but I would imagine Cordero Patterson and Jaylen Warren are no-goes in week 5.
Lifted Ones wants to know if the trade does happen with Adams to Pittsburgh, what's your prediction on when, if you can put a date?
Yeah, I was going to say I'll put a date and then I'll change the date right before that date happens so that it actually happens on that date. That tends to happen all the time. If I had to guess, there's a possibility it happens in the next couple of days, like maybe by Sunday. There's a possibility it happens by Sunday. I would say if not, by the end of next week, you're looking at it. I don't think this is a dragged out multi-week situation. I think it's going to be pretty fluid. Right now, there's stages. Right now, the Raiders are collecting their thoughts and their offers and gauging interest from everybody and everybody gauging interest with them and seeing where they stand. They'll get a list. Teams will continue to call. Those are the teams they're going to negotiate with, and then they'll make a decision. So I would say once they start narrowing teams down, which will be maybe tomorrow, the day after that, it'll start ramping up. I would guess in a couple of days.
Let's go over to Gavin James, who has a San Antonio Spurs profile picture, so it might be a bit of a Cowboys fan coming in to infiltrate. Says, how does Brandon Cooks being out favor the Steelers' defensive backs?
I mean, massively. You look at this right now and just say, you got CeeDee Lamb and nobody else, Jake Ferguson. So this definitely helps the Pittsburgh Steelers defense as a whole. It just limits an already very limited wide receiver core outside of CeeDee Lamb. The Cowboys have seen the effects of not having other guys around him this season and teams being able to kind of delete him from the game plan. I think that benefits the Steelers even more. And again, I think that the Steelers defense is going to bounce back. This is one of those games that just strikes me as like we come out here firing and make Dak Prescott's life hell for 60 minutes and not having Brandon Cooks. That was a big one. That was a real big one that I was surprised by today.
Let's go to Now Look It, who says, Strack, you and the Belskiator are too young to remember, but there was a time the Steelers converted a promising tight end into a stud offensive lineman named Larry Brown.
Yes, sir.
Might they consider doing the same with Mount Darnell, Washington?
I have heard the tales of Larry Brown many times. I don't think so. Only because Darnell is starting to be involved in the passing game, and they are able to utilize him and Michael Pruitt when he's healthy as just blocking tight ends, additional linemen essentially, and still allow him to play tight end too. I also don't think that they really need another tackle because once Troy Fautano's healthy, they'll be good to go, and they have their tackles there, and they like Dylan Cook and the progress that he has made when he is healthy. So I would say no. Larry Brown is a legend. I wouldn't imagine Mount Darnell, Washington is the next Larry Brown though.
Let's just get some clarification. Gavin James says not a Cowboys fan at all. Steelers through and through. Although if you were a secret agent, wouldn't that be? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just messing with you guys.
True. You sound like Fed.
Let's go to Vibing with the Dogs and close it out with this. It said, did you see that Ocho and James Harrison are going to fight? Who do you got? And should I put money on that?
Oh, I mean, yeah, you should don't listen to me, but you should always put money on anything you could bet, man. We remember everybody could throw it back to the days where we were locked in the house, and I know there are a lot of people. I know there are definitely more than me that were sitting there at 2 a.m. betting on Korean baseball or something because I was doing
gonna
it
say,
all.
were you a Bundesliga bettor back in
100%,
2020?
100%. I was texting the boys at 3 a.m, just like, did you see that? That was nuts. And yeah, it was great times. It was great times. Yeah, my philosophy is if you could bet on it, you bet on it. Who do I got? You want to see say James Harrison just because if he connects, it's over. But I don't think James is prepared enough to face somebody like Ocho who boxes. So that's where he's going to get the upper hand. This is not a. I think everybody just looks at it like the Frank Gore and everything else. Like if you're massive, you're going to be the scarier one. Yeah, maybe coming off the bus, but once you start hitting and you can't make contact with Ocho because he's just too swift, that's when it's going to be an issue. So I'm going Ocho in this one. Stinks because I like James. He's a good dude. And as for the money, yeah, make a bet, man. Always make a bet.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Ocho has to have the reach advantage, but I'm not going against James Harrison. I'm not going against him. It might be a bad bet, but honestly, I have a hard time believing anybody's going to beat James Harrison up. That's just in the back of my head. I can't get over that fact.
Yeah, I don't think he's getting knocked out. I just don't think he's going to be able to make contact with Ocho Cinco if Ocho Cinco knows how to, duck and weave a little bit better than James does. So it's like more like a Floyd Money Mayweather win than a Mike Tyson win. Right. He's not getting knocked out. If somebody knocks out James Harrison,
fattest man on the world.
Yeah, like I don't even have a response to that. That's just crazy.
Yeah. All right, so that closes the Steelers portion of our questions. Let's have one question here that's not Steelers related from No Coast Gaming, who says, "My daughter's getting a kitten this weekend. Yes. Biggest tip for a new cat owner."
Shout out No Coast Gaming. Shout out your daughter. I hope that she loves it. First thing you got to do is come up with a great name. Second thing is to prepare for all of your things to be destroyed. That is my biggest tip that I could pot. There is nothing they won't destroy. Nothing. People will come up, well, they're going to climb up your curtains and they're going to scratch your couch and they're blah, blah, blah. There are so many other things they're going to destroy. You don't even have an idea of the amount of things that they will destroy. So best advice I could give you is start meditating, listening to some, peaceful, calm books. Maybe take, some time and go sit in a sauna to relax or something, whatever lowers the blood pressure. You know what I mean? That's what I would say. And just, if you snuggle it and you love it early, it'll turn into a great cat. So that's my best advice. Nick's got some too.
Yeah, I got a couple. I echo every sentiment you have there, especially the beginning when you said they will ruin everything that you own. But
everything.
Sometimes it's in moderation, so you can deal with it.
Yeah,
so that's a wrap for today's questions.
Yeah. Shout out. Good luck. Tell your daughter, congratulations. It's a good time. With that said, guys, we are heading out of here.
Sorry, I had to throw that up.
That was awesome. We are heading out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts and find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow. We're breaking out another new segment. We're very excited for it. Plus, we'll probably have more on the Davante Adams trade and everything going on there. With that said, get outside, enjoy some sun for the first time in the Berg in a long time. And as I say every single day, enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.